The leftist crocodiles cry, boo-hoo. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Sooner or later, Elon Musk would have to offend leftist apologists for open advocates of violence against their opponents. That is, if he wanted to be a consistent enforcer of the Twitter rules. Now, a source that should know better accuses Elon Musk of skewing enforcement of those rules to the right. When this source says a thing like that, they are merely throwing off on Musk. But to see this come from The Intercept casts a doubt on their sincerity that only a profuse apology can settle. I don't think Elon Musk is going to get that apology, nor do I mean that he gives an unripe fig. His mind is made up, and what other people say to or about him is of no moment. If they threaten to sue, he threatens to countersue. Enough of that. We have work to do. Before we start, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, including this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which quotes Ronald Reagan as saying, "If fascism ever comes to America, it will come in the name of liberalism," which it has. And I'm going to go into detail on how that is. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can even click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. Now, because this discussion will center on interpretations of the Twitter rules, I have included a link to them in the description. I also have a link in the description to the original story in The Intercept about social media outlets, especially Facebook and Twitter, being state actors. They even quoted a law professor as giving a pointed warning of the potential for abuse. Specifically, Adam Ngô, professor of law at Michigan State University, said, quote, "When the government suggests things, it is not too hard to pull off the velvet glove and you get the iron fist." And I would consider such actions, especially when it's bureaucratized, as essentially state action with government collusion with the platforms, unquote Adam Ngô. Now, I said then, and I repeat today, that the motives of The Intercept were unclear. Did they mean to decry the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CSA for short, and its private partners, including Facebook and Twitter? Or did they, like Molly Ball at Time magazine, mean to celebrate the program as necessary to protect democracy? 3 days ago, they answered that question in the most disgusting fashion I could ever imagine. I have a link in the description to their piece on the moderational reforms at Twitter. Before I go any further, both links from The Intercept come courtesy of the Wayback Machine. They've already tried to cover up their bias on this Twitter moderation story once before. If they change their story again, I want you to see the story as I read it, because it is a booby-prized collection of 1. Libel and slander against not only Musk, but indeed all who disagree with any leftists, and 2. Denial of the existence of an organization that has dedicated itself to violence in support of leftist causes. And who is that leftist organization? Antifa, that's who. Antifa, or Antifa, stands for anti-fascist. Antifa is not so much an organization as a network. The focus of Elon Musk's attention is the United States network that goes by that name. I went to Wikipedia to get a line on them because theirs is the most comprehensive entry on them so far. The link I've left in the description is the permalink to their story. If they sanitize that entry, you'll see the version as I saw it. Now, I'll say this for them. They seem honest now. Here is what they say about Antifa. Quote, Antifa is a left-wing, anti-fascist, and anti-racist political movement in the United States. It consists of a highly decentralized army of autonomous groups that use both nonviolent direct action and violence to achieve their aims. Unquote Wikipedia. You heard correctly, ladies and gentlemen. Violence. Wikipedia cites 3 scholarly sources to back up what they say. These sources go back to 2018 and 2019. Now, rather than run through the whole ALA formatted references, I'm going to leave the links in the description. The first is a digital object identifier, part of an archiving system for scientific journals. The other 2 links come courtesy of the Wayback Machine. Wikipedia's editors can be very scrupulous about that, getting Wayback Machine or DOI links so that nobody can cross them up by deleting a source. The logo of Antifa is an overlay of the black flag of anarchy over the red flag of socialism. Different Antifa national chapters use different mottos to surround these flags. In English, it's anti-fascist action. In French, Antifa le jeu, or in English, Antifa the game. Some leftist organizations, like the Anti-Defamation League, make light of the violent acts of Antifa's militant arm. Others deny its existence entirely. Bear this in mind when evaluating the latest Intercept piece. Now, the Intercept piece begins with a lament of the recent suspension of 4 Twitter accounts. For this, they blame Andy Ng over the hat pronounced no, whom they decry as, quote, a far-right writer whose conspiratorial, error-riddled reporting on left-wing protests and social movements fuels the mass delusion that a handful of small anti-fascist groups are part of an imaginary shadow army called Antifa, unquote, Robert Mackey and Mika Lee, the authors of the piece. Imaginary? Mackey and Lee ought at least to read the Wikipedia entry. They might also have cared to read No's account in the New York Post of what he has suffered. The sufferings include a vicious beating and credible threats against his life. The Post article contains footage of one such attack and an image of No, his face badly bruised and bleeding, with a watermark by the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department. That's Multnomah County in Oregon, by the way. Mr. Mackey also includes a tweet, to which I've left a link in the description, dated December 2nd, 2021, under the Agrawal regime. The tone he takes dispels any reasonable speculation that he would even care what those other sources said, because in the tweet he says, quote, brave of Andy Ngô to refuse to reply to my request for comment on his debunked claim that the Dayton mass shooter was an Antifa militant, and then blocked me after my article proved he made serial reporting errors, so his fans won't be exposed to any further debunking of his, well, here he uses a barnyard term. The Dayton mass shooter he's talking about was the perpetrator of a tragedy that took place in 2019. Now, I'm not even sure whether Andy Ngô said or not that the perpetrator was an Antifa operative. But I'll tell you this, even if the Federal Bureau of Investigation said he wasn't, I don't necessarily believe that. This same FBI has turned into something as bad as the German Internal Security Forces, or Schutzstaffel, during World War II. And if Mr. Mackey wants to talk about bravery, I count it very brave of Mackey to leave such a thread at a time when anyone who dared criticize him risked permanent suspension over a stretch of the Twitter rules. Or for violating the unwritten Twitter rule, which always ran, Thou shalt not speak ill of a leftist. Now, you know why I left a link in the description to the Twitter rules. The apparent suspension of Antifa-related accounts on Twitter began on or about November 23rd. I have links in the description to 19 tweets containing the dialogue that caused Mackey and Lee to shed the crocodile tears. The user calling himself RanzPaul started it. He said, quote, Twitter is reportedly nuking minor attracted person accounts. This is eliminating much of Antifa Twitter. To which Elon replied that his first priority is removing any content that exploits children. He asked everyone to reply in comments to report anything that Twitter needs to address. Now that's leadership. The big boss asks people to report to him personally. Leaders do this. Managers do not. That is when Andy Ngô put in his 2 cents. Quote, a large number of Antifa accounts operate on Twitter to promote riots, give tips on how to commit violent crimes, and post names, photos, and addresses of targets plus their family members. Well, you can imagine what Elon said to that as soon as he saw it. Though why it took him 24 hours, I don't know. Elon said that incitement to violence would result in account suspension. So Mr. No said that he had been reporting Antifa accounts for years, and most of them were still on the site. Then he shared his story with the official picture of himself from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and 2 stills from surveillance video of when Antifa thugs beat him up. That frosted Elon, who took particular exception to the idea that the old regime at Twitter took no action on the accounts in question, although they clearly violated the Twitter rules as they stood then and as they stand today. Elon encouraged Andy Ngô to report to this thread for now, and Andy Ngô did. Boy, did he ever! The next 13 tweets come from him. Before I start cataloging them, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is rsilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges, but if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Now, whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit rsilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Andy Ngô began by saying, quote, countless journalists, law enforcement officers, businesses, and properties have been attacked through violent extremist organizations and in organizing an incitement on Twitter, close quote. In the next 12 tweets, he gave examples. He began with an account called, I kid you not, CRIMETHINC, pronounced crime think or some such thing. He described them as an Antifa collective and shared images of what they said were riot guides, tweets to radicalize, text to radicalize people into criminal militancy, and propaganda, all shared through Twitter for people to distribute. It also includes a description of the cell system and how to form a cell. The key, he said they claim responsibility for a number of domestic attacks. In the next 2 tweets, he gave examples with images. I flatly refuse to describe them. Just follow the links. Then he noticed that the CrimeThink account was gone, but listed 12 other accounts that are minor respellings of CrimeThink, saying they work like ISIS And then he started talking about Antifa's current announced campaign to commit sabotage and possibly murder or attempted murder at Tesla showrooms. He also describes how Antifa uses GoFundMe to raise money for legal defense or to satisfy retribution judgments from the criminal courts. Next, he mentioned something called the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club in Denton, Texas. Those people say they provide armed security for alternative lifestyle events. And then he quoted some of those people as making threats, including one very up-close and personal threat I choose not to describe in detail here. Again, follow the link if you really want to read it, though this falls under the heading of parental advisory. That statement came from an Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club member. That sure doesn't sound like a legitimate security operation to me. And No also mentioned an Antifa-related case from San Diego, California. Then he talked about someone intercepted at a Tesla showroom on November 25th in Linwood, Washington. He started a fire next to some propane tanks. Antifa didn't exactly claim responsibility for that, but they did praise the attack. Next, No dwelt on the case of Phoebe and Lewis, who went by the account name, I kid you not, Antifa Sheriff. No blames her for organizing the riots in Portland, Oregon in the summer of 2020. She stood trial for causing property damage, was convicted, and ordered to pay restitution. So she started a GoFundMe campaign to raise the money to pay the judgment. In the next to last tweet, No said that some in Antifa don't like the idea of announcing on Twitter a campaign of arson and sabotage against Tesla facilities. Attacks should be done discreetly, someone said. Then in the last tweet, he mentioned an account called IGD News, who issue claims of responsibility, and he gave an example, and instructs people on how to destroy evidence. In reply to all that last, another user archly observed that you never see any of this in the legacy media organs, the same organs that paint the right as extremists. Further down the thread came two reports from users other than Andy Ngô, who suffered at Antifa's violent hands. One of them talked about his children and himself getting pelted with rocks. And because he was responding to someone who was throwing the January 6th event in his face, this person said, January 6th was nothing. If folks were trying to arm an armed insurrection, we would have been heavily armed. That man has a point. The crowd strength at the big rally of people who came to hear Donald Trump speak was the strength of at least 10, maybe 20 infantry divisions. I'll let you just imagine the result had those people come armed, which they most emphatically did not. These are the kinds of people whom Mackey and Lee chose to defend, or the existence of whom they deny. Twitter has suspended the leftist accounts that The Intercept mentioned. CrimeThink and the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club are two of them. The other two are Chad Loader and Vishal Pratap Singh. Mackey and Lee quote Loader as saying this for himself. Quote, what I believe happened is that I and other accounts have been mass reported for the past few weeks by a dedicated group of far-right extremists who want to erase archived evidence of their past misdeeds and to neutralize our ability to expose them in the future, unquote, Chad Loader. Mackey and Lee also refer to an interesting archive containing what they allege is a list of accounts that people on the right are busy reporting. I've left a link to it in the description. Why? Because I encourage you to take a close look at that image. It shows that those accounts were reporting rightist accounts for real or imagined violations of the Twitter rules. Even more interesting is another tweet I ran across in my research. It is directly relevant to yesterday's election interference story. A user that goes by the name of Sarah M. actually says, and I quote, Senate Democrats, Twitter is being turned into a fascist platform. Musk is suspending major liberal accounts and allowing suspended terrorist accounts back on the platform. Twitter was a major force in the outcome of many recent elections, and Musk and his allies want to squash that. Unquote, Sarah M. You heard, someone not only admitted but avowed that Twitter had lent itself to election interference on behalf of Democrats. And thanks to Musk, that isn't going to happen anymore. I've left a link in the description so you can see it for yourselves. Mackey and Lee go on to suggest that Twitter is somehow lost to the leftist cause. They speak of increased tolerance for far-right hate speech, which neither they nor their sources care to define. Furthermore, they promote the narrative that the January 6th event was a failed coup, and not the false flag pseudo-operation that it actually was. Nor can they claim with any justice that all leftist accounts are under suspension. Many more remain, including some who seem to suggest that Andy Ngô either fabricated his account of the vicious beating he received or even deserved what he got. When those sources say that, they are behaving like neighborhood or schoolyard bullies. This is exactly what bullies do. They either deny their own atrocities or they throw off on their targets, and sometimes both. Mackey and Lee are indulging in this precise behavior in their piece, as are many of these remaining accounts. Most of the remaining leftist accounts do not bear mention because I do not wish to make a habit of giving extra publicity to accounts that actually deserve contempt and dismissal. But one needs no introduction. Rob Reiner. Yes, that Rob Reiner who portrayed Michael Stivic on All in the Family. I've had occasion recently to respond directly to some of his lies about conservatives generally. Follow the link to my account and you'll see. All this is taking place under the shadow of a veiled threat from the White House that the government might try to take Twitter over. How else do I explain this statement by Karine Jean-Pierre, according to Americans Report? I've left a link in the description to a tweet holding video of her saying, quote, "So let's just say this. We are watching closely to make sure that misinformation does not spread. We are all closely watching this, what you report and what is going on Twitter. Social media companies have an obligation to not allow anyone to incite violence through their platforms. This is especially true when violence is directed at particular communities, as we have seen." Closely watching? Why? Elon Musk would like to know. I have a link in the description to a tweet of his asking why so many in the legacy media are against freedom of speech. Furthermore, where was this White House when a mob in Multnomah County, Oregon viciously beat Andy Ngô? Or did they too consider that he deserved what he got? In any event, we now see Elon Musk at least beginning an even-handed enforcement of the rules. The suspended accounts clearly engaged in incitement to violence. Andy Ngô provided direct pictorial evidence. Don't just take my word for it. Follow the links and see for yourselves. So when Mackey or Chad Loader speak of archived evidence of past misdeeds, they're actually describing something that favors the right, not the left. Whoever defends such behavior can no longer call themselves journalists. The newsletter Unmuzzled News has the best assessment with which I could conclude. Quote, "Leftists are outraged by these moves because they allow other people to speak, and there is nothing the left hates more than free speech and people who they disagree with." Close quote. Or, in the immoral words of the rapper Ice-T, speaking of Musk, "People hate dudes so much that they're leaving Twitter, but they still drive his cars. The way people protest nowadays confuses me." Unquote, Ice-T, after I bowdlerized it just slightly. I've left a link in the description. I've left links in the description to the article, to the Twitter rules, to the original and more recent Intercept stories I mentioned, both courtesy of the Wayback Machine, to the Wikipedia entry on Antifa, as it now stands, to the 3 scholarly references about Antifa, to the tweet in which Robert Mackey calls Andy Ngô a coward for blocking him, to that incredible tweet storm holding 19 tweets by Andy Ngô, Elon Musk, and the user RanzPaul, to the tweet observing that the legacy media are ignoring the evidence of Antifa violence, to the 2 tweets testifying to real violence the account holders witnessed or suffered from, to that weird archive called Reporting 101, to Sarah M's tweet avowing election interference by Twitter, to video of Karine Jean-Pierre seeming to threaten Twitter, to Elon Musk asking why so many of the legacy media don't like freedom of speech, to Ice-T saying how confused he is that people will leave Twitter but not necessarily give up Tesla cars if they own them, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to my Twitter war playlist and the 2 videos I did about election interference and Twitter once having been a state actor. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.